Back in 2013, just as Volume 37 of Berserk was finishing up and Rickert was rolling into Falconia for the first time, author Kentaro Miura took a year-long break from releasing any of the Berserk chapters. But it wasn't just so he could sit on the beach enjoying the dozen-strong harem of beautiful Japanese supermodels, which I assume he no doubt has at his disposal at any time. No, instead he decided to work on a completely new manga series and his first original story since Berserk's inception in 1989. Releasing in its entirety from November 2013 until February 2014 was a brand new manga called Giganto Maxia, and though there are some similarities to Berserk, and honestly a pretty heavy similarity to Attack on Titan, which was also in high praise at the time, overall this is a completely new manga experience that opens up with what I can only say is potential. The basic premise sets us in a post-apocalyptic world far into the future, and we know that Miura loves his post-apocalyptic settings. I've spoken of his inspirations such as media as Mad Max and Fist of the North Star. Both take on this premise as well, and what can I say? I just absolutely love post-apocalyptic settings. I'm a huge fan and I cannot deny it. Give me all the barren landscapes and marauding villains that you can possibly throw at me. And this story follows the travels of a human named Delos and a strange girl that rides atop his shoulders named Prome. The two of them form a nice contrast, having Delos being more of the simple-minded, hands-on character that does most of the heavy lifting, and Prome speaking very pragmatically. She's very straightforward, and she provides the mystical element that makes Delos more than just a regular average human. Within this broken and forsaken world that was rampaged by beings called the Tirada, giant godlike figures, each the size of Ganeshka's Shiva form, they tore across the world destroying many clans and different forms of life. All that are left are particular tribes of life forms, not necessarily human, that are trying to survive on whatever they can and with whatever they have left. The majority of the giants are now under the control and command of something called the Empire of Olympus, which is actually run by humans. We don't get a ton of lore or backstory on these empire-like figures, but even the term Olympus was the home of the gods in the Greek mythology, so if humans somehow had control over these godlike beings and used them to execute their will, the symbolism adds up that their empire of gods would very much be like Olympus itself. But as large-scale as this initial premise may seem, the manga itself is very grounded in that it takes place in the middle of a desert with Delos and Prome encountering members of a beetle tribe. These are humanoid-like creatures that bear resemblance to the sentient beetles that they live with, and some even feature ectoskeleton-like skin that dramatically can increase their strength. Delos is a character that is quite enjoyable to read, and as we learn more about his history, being a slave and forced to fight in an arena-like combat situation, more becomes clear about his very style of fighting and how it fits his personality. First is the most obvious one, that he is primarily a wrestler, a grappler, using his large body to grapple and twist and contort his opponent's bodies into complete submission. But we also see that Delos has an intense sense of value for life of all kinds, due to once being in a situation where he was literally forced to kill his opponents on the arena floor. There's a scene where he's facing off against a member of the Beetle tribe, and as the audience feels the pain and anguish of the clan's history of being dominated by humans and the desperate hope for some kind of penance to it all, by allowing them to express the emotions that they have, this sort of collective unity within works as a way to respect each fighter during the match, sort of like a symbolic way to see where each person is coming from, and if it cannot be explained verbally, it can be felt as it resonates within everybody that's witnessing what is happening in front of them. Now, when it comes to Prome, the themes of her character are a lot more straightforward, which is fitting because that's how she speaks as a character. She's very matter-of-fact. Prome represents straight-up healing. She's not exactly human and has several unique magical abilities, but most prominently, that's to heal. She seems to be able to heal a variety of different ailments just by kissing the person, or using her nectar. And, how do I put this? Nectar is pee. She pees on you. Now, look, I don't know if Miura had some sort of peeing fetish, some sort of golden shower fetish, some sort of water sport fan, but let's be real. If she asks you to pee on her and you do, then that's totally cool, and that doesn't make you weird at all, right? Why did I feel the need to bring that up? Anyways, moving on. The point is she can heal. And as many of you may have guessed, Prome is not actually a young girl, and she actually possesses several different forms as she decides to either contain or release her energy of healing. With her and the themes of healing come the idea that after the destruction of this planet, it is just something that happens every so often on worlds. As worlds are brought to the brink of destruction, the remaining life needs to find a new sense of balance and equilibrium to continue to evolve and thrive, embracing a new way of life instead of clinging to the old. Whatever Prome is, she seems to be here to help the world live symbiotically with each other within this new landscape. In other words, this is the cycle of life, but on a massive scale, and whatever humanity did to gain control over the giant seems to be what is preventing this from happening. And I do like the idea of this moving forward renewal concept, and if you think about it, in a lot of ways it does parallel many of Berserk's themes. One of Puck's first lines in the series is something along the lines of it being more important to live for the future than it is to spend your whole life trying to avenge the past. But it's one of the hardest lessons to instill within ourselves because we define ourselves and base our identities on our pasts, rather than moving forward for a better future, and not just for us, but for the next generations that will come after us after we continue to reproduce and exist as living beings. So now I need to talk about what is, I guess, the big spoiler of the manga. Keep in mind this manga is only 1 volume long, so if this is considered a spoiler or not, it depends on how you want to view it, but here's the big twist that happens around the middle of the volume mark. If you don't want to know it, click off the video now. So remember when I said this manga bears resemblance to Attack on Titan? Well, it's not just because giants exist, but also because whatever Prome is, she grants Delos the ability to become a giant himself. Seeing Delos as worthy of this power and combined with his own combat abilities, the two of them sort of conjoin as Prome completely changes his DNA from human into that of a giant named Gora. As the human empire arrive to destroy the remains of the Beetle village, they bring along with them a giant of their own, and we see it's controlled by psychics of some sort working in unison. So that means to control these giants there is both a psychological manipulation at play, as the empire uses, or some sort of spiritual enhancement that Prome provides to Delos. And there's clearly a lot of lore here that is yet to be explored, but this opening is exciting enough that I think it works as a great setup to this world and to these kinds of situations that Delos is going to encounter. Yes, we do get to see giant Titan battles, and as far as the similarities between Attack on Titan go, I wouldn't say it's any kind of copying really, because Japan has always had a big kaiju and mech genre for decades upon decades, but I could definitely see Miura maybe wanting to try his own hand at that style of story, and maybe Attack on Titan was a bit of a jumping off point for him. There's also no shame in old masters being inspired by the newcomers. It keeps everybody on their toes and at their best game. Look, not only was this manga an absolute joy to read, I also even found a physical copy and picked it up, so I did not have to read it online, and I was very, very stoked about that. I'm happy to own it. Now, you can't really give this manga much of a grade since it is only 1 volume long. To my knowledge, there was no plan to continue it either, and trust me, with how long it took Berserk to come out in its later years, I'm glad that Miura didn't try to take on 2 manga at the same time. That would have been an absolute disaster for both of them. And obviously out of the 2, I'd much more prefer Berserk to take the top priority. But I can't lie that I did legitimately enjoy this setup, and I wish there was more. Obviously, there is also a lot of unanswered questions about the world and lore, but the 1 volume of this does answer more questions than volume 1 of Berserk answers about that story. The final chapter of this volume sees Delos and Prome wandering the earth, reaching the locations of destroyed tribes and creatures from the giants, as well as having some comical back and forth between their personalities, and it's honestly just really kind of inspiring. Just 2 living beings coming together and trying to do right by the world in the midst of some overarching enemy that may be too much for them to handle, but they're going to try anyways. When I finished it, I was rather upset that there was no volume 2. Again, maybe Miura stepped away from Berserk for a bit just because he felt like he wanted to do something different. Maybe Giganto Maxia was a story in his head for some time, or maybe it was just something he threw together as he went along to try to step away from his usual stuff. I fully support artists taking breaks to refuel their juices, and hey, After making this manga, when he did go back to Berserk, we got the Rickert slap. So maybe Giganto was exactly what he needed to wind up that epic pimp hand. If you haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend it. It's 7 chapters, 1 volume. The only downside is it might set you up to wanting much more, which you're never going to get. But as a nice one-off story with some great characters and the incredible Miura art that we've come to know and love, I think you're definitely going to want to read this. So yeah, let me know what you think about it. If you have read it, leave your thoughts about it down below in the comments. And if it had continued, what do you think that you would want to have seen through this story? Would you have wanted it to get darker like Berserk is? Would you want the lore expanded in a particular way? Tell me exactly what you would have wanted to see with its continuation. Also, please like the video if you did enjoy it, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see some more manga reviews. Also, check out the description of the video down below for links to my Patreon, merch store, and various social media outlets. Other than that, guys, thank you a lot for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you next time.